Working while pregnant can be tough, but a new federal law that went into effect this week could make it a little easier. The Pregnant Workers Fairness Act requires businesses with 15 or more employees to provide reasonable accommodations. Those could include longer breaks, shorter working hours, and time off for medical appointments and recovery for workers who need them because of pregnancy or childbirth. Now, estimates say the law, more than a decade in the making, could help nearly 3 million pregnant and postpartum workers across the U.S. Dina, co-founder and co-president of the workers' rights organization A Better Balance, is one of the women who pushed for the law. Dina, thank you so much for joining us. What made you want to push for these additional protections?
Thanks for having me, Paula. We were hearing from women in low-wage and physically demanding jobs on our free legal helpline over and over again who faced the same impossible choice. Can I maintain a healthy pregnancy or follow my doctor's orders? And too often women were forced off the job and faced devastating economic consequences when modest accommodations could help them continue working and supporting their families. It was outrageous. We worked with women who, were wound up homeless or unable to support their families, put food on the table, all because their employers refused to provide them temporary accommodations at work. And it was just outrageous, and the law needed to be updated.
Now, the law requires employers to work in good faith with pregnant and postpartum workers to provide accommodations. What do you say to some small businesses that believe this creates a hardship?
We're right. So let's just say that, backing up for a second, the problem was a gap in our nation's federal civil rights law because the Pregnancy Discrimination Act really only required equal treatment. It didn't require an affirmative right to accommodations for pregnant workers, and another federal law, the Americans with Disabilities Act, only required accommodations for workers with disabilities. And so pregnant workers, postpartum workers were really falling through the cracks, and they needed their own affirmative right to accommodation. So we drafted a standalone piece of legislation modeled on the Americans with Disabilities Act, borrowing from Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which applies to workers with 15 or more employees, and says basically that employers need to accommodate absent undue hardship to the employer. And that's a really workable standard. We worked with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and garnered bipartisan support for this legislation because employers recognized that this legislation was good for business. It's not only good for women, it was good for business and good for the economy. These are temporary accommodations that help keep women healthy and attached to the workforce, promoting fairness and equality and opportunity. So this was really a win-win, and we really had employers and business on our side pushing for this legislation.
And recently another law, the Pump for Nursing Mothers Act, also went into effect. I think I can report, as a source familiar, that breastfeeding is like a part-time job, but this gives breastfeeding workers more rights. So what impact will this actually have?
Right. Well, like the Pregnant Worker Fairness Act, which also provides breastfeeding support, it closes a loophole in our nation's labor law, Break Time for Nursing Mothers Act, that allows more salaried workers access, who are carved out of that law, access to time and space to pump breast milk at work. So together, these laws are really a historic step forward for women and families, for women's rights, for racial justice, for economic justice, and really should be celebrated at a time where there's a lot more that we need to advance and protect women in the workplace. These are really, really important protections.
So what's next? What's the next fight for you?
Unfortunately, our work is far from over. First and foremost, we need to make sure that workers understand their rights. That, with respect to the Pregnant Worker Fairness Act and Pump for Nursing Mothers Act, we want to educate, we want to empower, we want to make sure that workers shouldn't fear, asking for the accommodations they need. Our organization, A Better Balance, has a lot of tools and resources available. Folks should check them out and reach out. We have a free legal helpline as well. And of course, since our inception, we've been fighting for policies like paid sick time and paid family and medical leave. So no worker in this country has to choose between caring for a new baby or seriously a loved one and a paycheck. And we will not stop fighting for those protections. And I have to say that I am hopeful. I'm hopeful that policies and bipartisan solutions like the Pregnant Worker Fairness Act show that bipartisan solutions are possible.
Dina, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we'll be right back.